Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. There's a delay in Canadian shipments of COVID-19 vaccines. We tell you why. Plus, some Alberta restrictions to be lifted Monday. We speak with business owners about the challenges of closing and reopening multiple times. And a former Lethbridge Hurricane takes the ice for his first official NHL game.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Hello, thanks for joining us. 2 drivers were injured early this morning when a school bus collided with a semi carrying manure just north of McGrath. Fortunately, the school bus was not carrying any students at the time. The collision occurred at the corner of Township Road 62 and Range Road 222. According to a Facebook post from the West Wind School Division, the bus driver sustained minor injuries and the truck driver was taken to hospital. RCMP are investigating the incident. There's going to be a temporary delay in Canadian shipments of COVID-19 vaccines from Pfizer and BioNTech. The companies say they are temporarily cutting back vaccine deliveries to Canada because of issues with their European production lines. Procurement Minister Anita Anand says Pfizer thinks it can still deliver 4 million doses by the end of March, but it's no longer guaranteeing that that will happen. Chief Public Health Officer Dr. Theresa Tam says Canada is on track to hit 10,000 COVID-19 infections per day by the end of the month, with another 2,000 deaths possibly by then.
Earlier this morning, Minister Anand talked about her conversation with Pfizer Canada regarding impacts to vaccine production. Due to work to expand one of the company's manufacturing facilities, deliveries to all countries receiving Pfizer doses made at the European facility will be temporarily reduced. This includes Canada. I want to be very clear. This does not impact our goal to have enough vaccines available by September for every Canadian who wants one.
This afternoon, Alberta's Health Minister Tyler Chandra responded to the announcement of the shipment delay.
This is out of our control, but it will impact Alberta's immunization schedule. As a result of fewer doses of vaccine coming into our province, it will take longer to complete immunization of the priority healthcare workers who are currently part of Phase 1. It will also delay our ability to start immunizing all seniors over the age of 75, regardless of where they live, and all Indigenous seniors who are 65 years and older. We had hoped to announce the start of these vaccinations in the coming days, but that is now in question. We will continue focusing on vaccinating all residents and staff in long-term care and designated supportive living throughout the province, and I expect that we will have all of these facilities completed by Monday.
In the past 24 hours, the province has seen 785 new cases of COVID for a total of 12,189 active cases. Nearly 3 million tests have been performed in total, more than 13,000 in the last day. 796 people are in hospital and 124 in ICU. So far, 779,000 people have recovered from the virus, and 1,402 Albertans have died. A year after COVID-19 was first detected in the Chinese city of Wuhan, the global death toll has topped 2 million. Johns Hopkins University says the count ticked over today. The U.S. has the highest death toll at 390,000. Many health experts are predicting another year of loss and hardship in places like Iran, India, Mexico, and Brazil, with those 4 countries accounting for about a quarter of the world's deaths. Here in Alberta, COVID restrictions have caused wellness services like hair salons to close, reopen, and close, only to be granted permission to open once again on Monday. With more on how local wellness service providers are dealing with these swift changes, Ainsley O'Reilly reports.
Hair salons, barber shops, aesthetics, manicure and pedicure businesses, Reflexology and piercing and tattoo shops have been given the green light by the provincial government to reopen their doors. Brio Salon and Spa says their phone has been ringing off the hook.
It's so fun. It's like, hi, this is Heather from Brio. And they're like, oh my gosh, I was so excited when I got to hear that everybody's just so glad that we get to open.
With 20 employees, the salon will be making nearly 150 calls to reschedule appointments. No COVID-19 cases have been traced back to Alberta salons. Protocols haven't changed from the last closure. 15% fire capacity, mask wearing, and appointment only is required. Employees will work extended hours, but its owners would prefer this over the alternative.
It's kind of the unknown. I mean, we're okay. Lethbridge really does support local, and we've been so thankful for that. People buying gift cards and coming and buy product, but that's only going to go for so long. Like we keep saying, okay, we're okay, we're okay. But that only goes for so long until all of a sudden it's like, okay, this is now getting scary.
Stylists say they are thrilled to welcome clients back and add that aesthetics play a huge role in overall wellness.
Things have kept up, and I think it's because everyone places a lot of value in taking care of themselves for their own sake.
Brio will open its doors Monday at 9 a.m. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
The pandemic has been tough on small businesses, particularly restaurants. A popular Chinese eatery has adjusted to accommodate its hungry patrons. As Loris Alexander explains, throughout it all, the owner has kept his community spirit.
The pandemic has been tough on small businesses, particularly restaurants. But Edward Pan, the owner of New Shanghai Golden Chopstick, says his fear quickly dissolved into motivation for success, despite the circumstances.
Right in the beginning, there was fear and a lot of uncertainty. But we continue moving, trucking along, and as long as we make good food, and as long as we build that great relationship with our customers and with our community, I believe we would continue being successful and continue moving forward.
Pan says sales since the pandemic have gone up by over 50%. He is a fourth-generation restaurant owner, with the first established in 1949.
That's why I say this restaurant is very stable, because it's gone through World War, it's gone through financial downturn, and now we're going through COVID, and I believe this restaurant will survive.
Support local is something Pan strongly believes in, and credits much of the success to community support.
I'm very happy this community has come together and continue supporting each other. And I believe the future is very bright when this is all over, and I believe it's coming soon.
For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
Sewing for a cause. That's what one local nonprofit run by volunteers is doing. As video journalist Micah Quinn explains, the idea for the organization came from a simple feel-good moment.
The idea for the Stitch It Forward Society of Lethbridge started 2 years ago after Cora Walkie's father had a heart attack, which resulted in open heart surgery. The nurses gave him a heart pillow after he had the surgery.
To hold to his chest when he coughs or stands up. And myself and my mom talked to the nurse, and they were all made by volunteers. And so they always run out of them very quickly. And so we started sewing them and running them up there, and it kind of snowballed with other people we knew joining us, and we made a Facebook page and asked for help. And soon we had a whole bunch of other projects going and lots of people helping us.
The society started off with sewing the heart pillows, which morphed into making scent pillows for NICU units and sewing blankets for those in need.
If you can sew, knit, crochet it, we've done it. We've helped lots of different organizations all over Alberta. The last 9 months, we've been really focusing on COVID items. So we've done over 7,000 cloth masks and headbands and scrub bags.
Walkie says that the society received a grant from the Red Cross, and part of that grant was to give away groceries to people affected by the COVID-19 pandemic.
On January 18th, 19th, 20th, and 21st, you can come down to Save On, and you will be given a $50 gift card to use that night. So You sign up online on our Facebook page. There's a link to a Google Docs. So you sign up with what day and what time you want to come, and then you come on down and use it. And $50 is a good amount of money to get something you need, right?
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The Alberta Union of Provincial Employees says that the handling of 200 Alberta Liquor and Gaming Commission employees who received a notice of termination was ill-timed by the Alberta government. The members recently held a town hall where they voiced their displeasure with the layoffs. AUPE Vice President Susan Slade says that the government needs to look at the hardships that people have been facing due to the pandemic.
They seem to be closing small businesses and, doing those things, but they're still allowing malls to be open. So you can just walk freely through a mall or into a big box store. AJLC is a revenue generator for the government. And it's just, it's kind of confusing and upsetting to members just to, all of a sudden, sorry, we're going to lay you off because we don't have the places open, like the casinos aren't open, and there's no expected date of recall. So you're just kind of being sat, here's your notice, and we'll call you when we call you.
Slade says that the AUPE hopes to see the employees back to work soon, as well as other Albertans who have had to make do during this difficult time. Former Lethbridge Hurricanes captain and World Juniors Team Canada captain Dylan Cousins took the ice last night for his first official NHL game. Cousins made an immediate impact, recording his first NHL point, an assist off of Buffalo Sabres teammate Tobias Rieder. Canes general manager Peter Anholt says it's neat to see how many local fans will be following the 19-year-old's career for years to come.
Our scouting staff is certainly so proud right off the bat, and after picking them where we picked them, and for myself, you feel like a parent in a sense. You're proud as can be of him, and and how he's developed not only into a great player, but a great person and a young man. So all in all, we all feel we had a little bit to do with it in some way, shape, or form, even though it was a small amount. But ultimately, he's the kind of kid, he won't forget his roots and he won't forget where he came from. So.
Meanwhile, in the WHL, the Saskatchewan government announced $600,000 of funding for each of the 5 WHL teams in the province. Anholt shares what this could mean for junior hockey in Alberta.
We have a significant impact on our communities, and we have a direct relationship to revenues throughout the whole community, either directly or indirectly. And so when the hockey teams are hurting, it's a real indicative of how everybody's hurting. So, we're really pleased that the Saskatchewan government is helping out those Saskatchewan teams. I think it's fantastic, and we're just trying to move forward ourselves, and hopefully we get a chance to play at some point.
Harvest Meats is recalling its Polish sausages sold in 675-gram packages with a best before date of March 15th. It says undercooking may make them unsafe to eat, and the product should be thrown away or returned to the stores. The recall affects customers in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, the Northwest Territories, and Ontario. A paramedic who was behind the wheel of an ambulance east of Edmonton has been charged with impaired driving. Another media outlet is reporting that people called Vegreville RCMP on January 2nd after noticing the ambulance was driving the wrong way on Highway 16. When RCMP pulled the ambulance over, Mounties discovered an elderly patient in the back who was being transported along with another paramedic. Police arrested and charged the driver with impaired driving of a motor vehicle over .08. A Camrose, Alberta man has been arrested for allegedly distributing child sexual abuse materials online. The arrest came as the result of a joint investigation between Alert's Internet Child Exploitation Unit and Camrose Police Service. Junvier Fajarito was arrested on January 6th at his home in Camrose. The 20-year-old suspect has been charged with possession and distribution of child pornography. A former Mountie and sports coach convicted of sexually abusing boys in Saskatchewan and British Columbia has been granted full parole. Alan Davidson was sentenced to almost 6 years for abusing 7 boys in the late 1970s and early 1990s. The offenses began in BC, where he met some of the victims through coaching hockey and baseball. Davidson was later hired as an RCMP officer and worked in Saskatchewan, where court heard that he targeted 2 other boys. BC's provincial health officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, says one person in BC has been diagnosed with the South African strain of COVID-19.
We now have 4 confirmed cases of the UK variant in British Columbia, 3 of whom are linked to one specific traveler and 1 related to an additional traveler. There are no other contacts. We don't believe that this has spread at all from these 4 cases. In addition, in the last day or so, we've also identified our first case of the South African variant of the COVID-19 virus, and this is in a person who has not known to have traveled or to have connection with a traveler. So we are still investigating where this person might have contracted this virus, and that will continue. It is, of course, concerning that we don't know where this arose. However, at the moment, it does not appear to have spread in the community beyond the person that we've identified.
Dr. Henry also says she's saddened and disturbed at reports of racism against First Nations communities that have experienced outbreaks. Ontarians have been ordered to stay at home except for essential trips to the grocery store and getting outside for some exercise. That's on top of a state of emergency announced this week to combat the spread of COVID-19. Toronto streets were quiet, but activity remained Thursday at parks and construction sites allowed to keep working.
Yeah, just taking my dog for a walk, getting some exercise for her, myself, trying to stay off the Zoom meetings for a bit, clear my mind. Yeah. What I know, what I'm sure I hear is that like for exercise and like essential purposes, you're allowed to leave outside your house. And I feel like the risk is relatively low when you're out here. You're not really interacting with many people. You're always pretty much 6 feet away from everyone. And like we all know that it's a lot less risk outside than it is inside. So I feel like it's pretty safe to be out here, and it's good for the mental health. It's really important, like, to not be inside all day.
Skating, trying to get some exercise, because you really don't know what the restrictions are. It's kind of confusing to us. I have a son at home doing school, and we don't understand really what it is. Our friends of ours were talking, we're a little bit confused. So I was supposed to skate at another rink, and they said it was closed today, so I came here. I have an only child, and we've had a group of friends that he's been with since May, and we're not sure if they're allowed to be together anymore or what, but my concern is with kids who are single children, how much this is going to do for their mental stability. That's my fear. Is my son is a social kid, he's an active kid, and they've kind of taken everything away from them. So like we were going to go to a skate park tomorrow, we're not sure if we're allowed, we don't know, and there's nowhere that you can find the proper stating rules. So I think that the government is kind of lollygagging it, and even the police don't know what they're doing, so it makes you fearful of what's going to happen.
Ontario is reporting 2,998 new COVID-19 infections and 100 more deaths. But the death count doesn't just include the past 24 hours. Due to a data entry error, it includes 46 deaths reported in Middlesex, London that occurred earlier in the pandemic. Researchers at the Ontario's University of Guelph are studying art by children and teens as part of an ongoing project exploring children's perspectives on the pandemic. They say more than 120 submissions that have flowed in so far show many young Canadians feel like they don't have a future. The head of the school's early childhood studies program says the works show feelings of isolation, anxiety, and despair as lockdowns disrupt a critical period in the development of self-identity. South of the border, state capitals have stepped up security, deploying National Guard units, SWAT teams, and extra police officers amid heightened safety concerns following last week's violence at the U.S. Capitol. A U.S. Defense Department official says it's been determined that about 25,000 National Guard troops are necessary to help protect the U.S. Capitol and Washington, D.C. Officials say so far they have commitments from governors for close to 22,000 members of the Guard. Well, we had a bit of a gusty wind today, but nothing like earlier this week. I'll tell you how windy the weekend will be in my upcoming weather report right after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. So hard to believe that it is the weekend already. Into tonight, -2 is our overnight low. We could get some wind gusts from the west up to 60 kilometers per hour. Into tomorrow, Saturday, sunshine, 5 degrees is the high, but wind gusts up to 40 kilometers per hour. Not too bad compared to what we had earlier this week. Sunday, windy and a mix of sun and cloud, high of 8 degrees. That precipitation that we were supposed to get on Sunday night into Monday has now disappeared, giving us mainly cloudy skies on Monday with a high of 3 degrees. 6 our high for Tuesday with mainly sunny skies and a mix of sun and cloud on both Wednesday and Thursday with a high of 2 on Wednesday and down to -3 on Thursday. It looks so weird to have that minus in there because we've been so lucky with the plus temperatures lately. Average high for this time of year, -2 right there. -14 our average low. 14 was our high temperature back in 1942 and it was a freezing -41 in 1950. 8:23 a.m. was when the sun rose today, and our sunset was at 4:59 p.m., so just about at that 5 o'clock hour. Let's take a look at what's happening across the country for weather, our highs for tomorrow. Not bad on the coast. Victoria, mainly cloudy, fog patches in the morning, 8 degrees. 8 degrees also the high in Vancouver. They could expect some fog tomorrow as well. Edmonton, mainly sunny with a high of 3. Calgary, high of 2 degrees, sunshine as well. They could get a bit of wind, maybe about 40 kilometers per hour, so not too bad there as well. Windy, actually a little bit more in Saskatchewan. 50 kilometer per hour winds expected in Saskatoon with a high of -2. 60 kilometer per hour winds expected in Regina with a high of -1. Sunshine there. Winnipeg could get some flurries tomorrow with a high of -6. Now, over in Toronto, not a bad day at all. Tomorrow, high of 4, mix of sun and cloud. Over in eastern Ontario and into Quebec, we're getting some snowfall warnings. They could have some significant snow, 15 to 25 centimeters, high of 0 for both of those cities. And then significant precipitation is also expected in New Brunswick, and particularly the Fredericton area. Mix of snow with rain, high of 1 degree there. Halifax, mix of some, actually, you know what? There's supposed to be some rain there in Halifax, high of 2 degrees. They are actually under a rainfall warning. Charlottetown, mix of sun and cloud, 1 degree is the high, -1 the high tomorrow for St. John's, with a wind warning, wind up to 80 to 100 kilometers per hour there. So there you go. That is your forecast. Wall Street stock markets are in the red on reports showing the pandemic is deepening the hole the American economy is in. Stocks have been slowly receding since the S&P 500 set a record high a week ago on optimism that COVID-19 vaccines and more stimulus from Washington will bring an economic recovery. Markets are also being dragged lower by this morning's December retail sales report, which showed sales dropped a much bigger than expected 0.7% last month. Quebec has issued 11 fines to 9 Dollarama stores for failing to respect sanitary guidelines, but isn't revealing the nature of the violations. The province's Workplace Safety Board visited 68 Dollarama locations since last March. Dollarama workers held protests last year to speak out about a lack of sanitary measures at the company's facilities. Home sales shot up more than 47% on a year-over-year basis in December. The Canadian Real Estate Association says sales hit a record for the month to end what was also a record year. Almost 551,400 homes changed hands last year, up 12.6% from 2019, with the average price for a home in December jumping just over 17% from December 2019 to a record $607,280. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 49 points to 17,909. The Dow was down 177.26 to 30,814. The S&P 500 was down 27.29 to 3,768. The Nasdaq was down 114 points to 12,998. West Texas Intermediate oil was down $1.21 to 52.36 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 7 cents to 2.74 US. Gold was down 18.08 to 1,828 US an ounce. Silver was down 75 cents to 24.77 US an ounce. Wheat is at $290 per metric ton. Barley is at $294. Canola is at $685. And corn is at $335 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 98 cents to 118.20. Feeder cattle were up 2.45 to 135.83. Lean hogs were up 58 cents to 72.65. And the Canadian dollar was down over the past 24 hours at 78.51 US.
Recapping one of our top stories today, Pfizer has said it's temporarily cutting back vaccine deliveries because of modifications to European production lines. But the Prime Minister says Canada will still be on track to have all Canadians vaccinated by next fall. Meanwhile, Chief Public Health Officer Dr. Theresa Tams warns that vaccinations over the next few months won't bring the numbers down in Canada and that the country is on track to hit 10,000 new daily infections of COVID by the end of the month. Coming up, eating sugar won't cause diabetes. That's according to Dr. Seema Nagpal, the Vice President of Science and Policy for Diabetes Canada. Dr. Nagpal will also discuss how researchers are getting closer to finding a cure for the disease. That interview is coming up right after the break. Stay with us. Diabetes is an illness that seems to be on the increase worldwide. But what is it exactly? What causes it? And are we getting any closer to finding a cure for this? Joining me to discuss this further is Dr. Seema Nagpal, the Vice President of Science and Policy for Diabetes Canada. She joins us via Skype from Ottawa. Dr. Nagpal, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Now, we often hear of type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Can you first of all explain what the difference is between the two?
Diabetes is a disease where the body can either not produce insulin or can't use it properly in the body. And insulin, of course, is a hormone that's produced by the pancreas, and its role is to regulate the amount of glucose in the blood. And blood sugar must be carefully regulated to ensure that the body can function properly and that there's no acute health crises because of an extremely high or low blood sugar. So type 1 is diabetes, is a disease where the pancreas does not produce any insulin. And the cause of type 1 diabetes is unknown, and it's really not preventable at all. Type 2 diabetes is much more common here in Canada and around the world, and that's when the pancreas cannot effectively use or produce enough insulin. And that's in about 90 to 95% of Canadians living with diabetes.
Okay, so how widespread is it in Canada? And you just kind of gave us some stats there.
Yeah, there's about 11.5 million Canadians living with diabetes or pre-diabetes. So that's 1 in 3 Canadians living with the condition. Right now, at the age of 20, Canadians face a 50% chance of developing diabetes in their lifetime. So it has huge implications for the individuals, families, society overall. It's a very large epidemic of diabetes that we're facing.
Right, now you mentioned pre-diabetes. So what exactly is pre-diabetes?
Pre-diabetes occurs when an individual's blood sugar levels are high, but not yet high enough to be diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. If a person has prediabetes, they're about 50%, they have a 50% chance of progressing on to develop type 2 diabetes.
Okay, so do we know what the cause of diabetes is? Like, are there ways to prevent it?
And I think that's a really important question because people have preconceived ideas of diabetes being a condition, specifically type 2 diabetes being a condition that a person brings upon themselves. And that's very untrue. We know that there are risk factors that place a person at higher risk for developing diabetes. And those can be thought of in kind of 2 different ways: as modifiable risk factors, those we can change, and unmodifiable risk factors. And certainly in the unmodifiable risk factors, we know that a strong family history, aging, certain ethnic backgrounds, these are things that a person cannot change, and that might place them at a very high risk, and it might be very likely that a person develops type 2 diabetes. Modifiable risk factors are ones that are within a person's control, and they can try to eat a healthier diet or become physically active. But sometimes, even despite best efforts, those unmodifiable risk factors really are too strong to overcome the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. So it's a complex condition with complex risks, and it really needs to be thought of in a more broad way. And the time for blame and shame is really over.
Okay, great. So now how would someone know if they have diabetes? Like, what are the symptoms?
Right. So I think that the symptoms are heterogeneous. They vary a fair bit across individuals. A person can feel increasingly thirsty. They may have to urinate more frequently, increased fatigue, blurred vision. Sometimes with type 2 diabetes, the symptoms are absent completely. So it really is, it varies from person to person, but really requires, if a person feels changes in their health, connection with their healthcare provider to investigate what's going on and to get that addressed as quickly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. What are the long-term effects of diabetes?
So yeah, the diabetes can result in complications that are quite significant. A study a few years ago showed that it doesn't have to, though. That with monitoring and treatments, that a person with diabetes can live as well as a person without diabetes. But we do know that diabetes can increase a person's risk for strokes, heart attacks, kidney failure, as well as amputations and vision loss. So there's very significant complications that can occur and really require a person to be active in their own care and working with a diabetes care team that can help prevent those complications.
You'd mentioned before that a 20-year-old could have a 50% chance of developing it or not. So what are the factors that person could develop it? Is there anything that they can do to prevent that?
Right, and I think that interacting with a healthcare team where you're in close connection with a physician, a dietitian, a pharmacist, a nurse, these are all things that help a person identify potentially their own barriers to achieving a glucose that's within their target range, or and help to select the right treatments and therapies that work for them. And that's the best thing that can be done, to work with your healthcare team, to understand your condition, and to be supported through your family, your community, that allows so that you're allowed to access your treatments, to monitor your blood sugar, and really get a goal for what your treatment is supposed to achieve, and try to achieve those goals.
So if a young person eats like too much sugar, could they develop it, or is that a myth?
That's really a myth. I mean, healthy eating is really important, of course, for everybody. You don't develop diabetes because you eat too much sugar. No, it's really about the risk factors in type 2 diabetes that a person has, and how to the best degree possible to manage those risk factors through healthy eating, physical activity, stress management. These are all things that everybody wants to do and should focus on. But especially if you have a family history, or with aging, if you come from an ethnic background, like I said, these are all things that together may increase a person's risk. And there's no there's no way to prevent type 1 diabetes, and that idea that if a child or a young person has developed type 1, that they ate too much candy, it's really it's a myth, or a story that's told that is unfortunately works against the stigma that people already feel when they develop diabetes, and really should be displaced with more knowledge and truth about the condition.
Yeah, that's a very good point. How is type 2 diabetes treated and managed?
Well, at the onset, often it's managed through diet therapy, through healthy eating, regular and consistent physical activity. Ultimately, we know that diabetes is a progressive condition, meaning it continues, and most people will require medication to manage their diabetes. So often it is a combination of diet, physical activity, monitoring, medication use, and stress management for type 2 diabetes. For type 1 diabetes, it always requires insulin and monitoring, as well as those very healthy lifestyles that we all try to achieve with healthy eating and physical activity.
Great. So can you tell us about some of the newer methods of treatment, implanted devices, that type of thing? And can you tell us how effective they are?
Yeah, well, we know that specifically with type 1 diabetes, a person needs to inject insulin. And some people with type 2 also need to inject insulin. That can be done through a needle, as well as and in recent years, it's not incredibly new, but in recent years, insulin pumps have been used to deliver insulin into people with requiring insulin. New other developments in technology means that people can have access to devices that monitor their blood glucose. These are flash monitoring devices as well as continuous glucose monitors. And these devices allow people to know their blood sugar through an easy mechanism, because a sensor is placed under their skin, and they can use a device to continuously look at their blood sugar. Traditionally, people would have to prick their finger to get a drop of blood onto a test strip, and would have to test the blood sugar in that way. So there's more innovative ways that make blood glucose monitoring easier, and the delivery of insulin easier through a pump, that make controlling blood glucose a bit more easy for people living with diabetes who require insulin.
Okay, and have there been any recent developments in finding a cure or in transplanting a pancreas or something of this nature?
Yeah, that's a great question. Interestingly, there's been some recent news about scientists at the University of Alberta who were able to, in animal models, cure diabetes. And that's been a very interesting line of research, and we certainly hope that this process will translate into new discoveries in humans. So this is something that we're watching very closely, and especially timely, considering that 2021 is the 100th anniversary of the year that Canadian researchers discovered insulin, and brought this discovery to the world, and offered people living with diabetes around the world a chance to live long and healthy lives. So these researchers out of Alberta provide promise, and we really hope that it translates into something that's able to provide humans with a cure for diabetes. You also asked about pancreas transplant, so I'll just touch on that for a moment. And transplants are sometimes performed for people with diabetes, and these are surgical options that are often performed at the same time as pancreas transplants. And these are usually patients who are at high risk for kidney failure. And it's typically reserved for those people who have serious complications of diabetes. And that's because transplants themselves can have serious complications, and the medications that are used afterwards can cause side effects. So certainly it's an option for some people, but we're not quite at a cure. And in the meantime, we're looking for ways that we can offer people living with diabetes a way to manage their condition and to live long and healthy lives with a better and better quality of life.
And I would imagine that diabetes must have some sort of an impact on mental health as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
It really does. People with diabetes are often overwhelmed or frustrated by the burdensome demands of managing this illness. They are at greater risk for developing certain mental illnesses, and people with mental illness are at greater risk for developing diabetes. We know that depression is more common in people with diabetes compared to the general population. So it's a real issue, and something that might be overlooked. The term that we often talk about is diabetes distress. And that's something that's very real because there's no break from diabetes. It's a 24/7 condition. You can't go down south to get away from it. You can't go out for dinner to get away from it. It's something that is forever present, and something that people need to develop ways to manage that burden and that stress over time.
I can imagine. Now, you'd mentioned so much in the interview about managing your diet and eating healthy. Is there a certain type of diet that is best to help manage diabetes?
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion about the best diet, the diabetic diet. Sometimes people say. I would just say that the best diet for somebody is a healthy diet that they can sustain. These binge diets that are very difficult, where you lose some weight for a short amount of time, but then that eating pattern is not sustainable. That's not what somebody should be shooting for. It's really a healthy, balanced diet that is sustainable over time. That's what somebody should be focusing on, and working closely with a dietitian to identify goals and help select a pattern, identifying things that work well for the individual. There's no one size fits all here. It's really individualized to your lifestyle and your culture and what you like to eat and your eating patterns. Those are all things that require a lot of thinking and planning to make sure that it's a good fit and it's something that you can keep up with.
Makes sense. Any final thoughts or advice for someone with diabetes or anyone who maybe is worried that they could be developing it?
Yeah, I think just making sure that you get the resources and support that you need. Checking out our website at diabetes.ca is there's some really good information about how to reduce your own personal risk if that's something that that somebody is willing to try to do. For people living with diabetes, there's lots of resources on our website as well. But working closely with your healthcare team to make sure that you identify what you wish to shoot for, that your own health goals, and that you're working towards that with your healthcare team. I think that's really important to make sure that your own goals are well defined and that you're working towards those.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Nagpal, for the information. Dr. Seema Nagpal, the Vice President of Science and Policy for Diabetes Canada. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Many Christians in the U.S. got actively involved to influence the presidential election to get a government elected that would uphold biblical principles. However, today's guest suggests that unless something changes in the way young people view the world, future elections might not produce a very godly government. We're joined by Dr. Jeff Myers, president of Summit Ministries, based out of Colorado, and author of Unanswered Questions, available at summit.org. Jeff Myers, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Yeah, glad to be with you.
All right. So, Dr. Myers, can you first of all just tell us a little bit about yourself and your ministry, maybe your background?
You bet. Summit Ministries is a training program for young adults that equips them, a rising generation, to embrace God's truth and to champion a biblical worldview. That's the heart of what we do. So we are wanting to train leaders for our nation who think biblically. The program has been in existence for 58 years. I've had the privilege to be the president for 9 years. I attended as a student way back in the day when I was considering graduating high school and considering leaving the church. Came to a Summit Ministries 2-week-long training program. Founder David Noble. I said to him, "I hope you have a lot of answers, but I have a lot of questions." I was so arrogant, and he said to me, "At Summit, we aren't afraid of questions." And I realized I was in the community of people where I could really ask the tough questions about my faith and about the world and everything else. For the first time, I felt like I found a place as a Christian in our age.
Okay, so that's amazing. Now, you spend a lot of time mentoring youth and training up youth leaders, but you say that there's not much of a difference right now between the way young adults who are in the church think about the world compared to young adults who aren't in the church. So can you give us maybe some examples of this?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. I have the privilege to work with about 40,000 young people here. These are pretty intensive programs, so it's a lot of mentoring. A few years ago, I began that young adults in the church and young adults outside of the church were very little different. So, for instance, 69% of church-going young adults today say they believe there are no absolute truths, that they are the ones who decide for themselves what is right and what is wrong. Then another thing began to emerge when socialism began to really reemerge as a force in our nation. So many young adults were telling me, oh, yeah, I think it's a great idea. I really love it. And we did some studies on this and found that young adults are 5 times as likely to have a Marxist worldview as their older counterparts in church. So, in both social areas, they and political and economic areas, they have decided I am the one who decides what's right and wrong. I'm the one who decides what is true, right? So you take those things and put them together, and you end up in some really weird conversations. I would have a conversation with someone and I would say, well, that's not what socialism is. Look at all the failures. And they say, but I'm the one who decides what is true for me. And so I know what I want socialism to be. Therefore, that's what it is.
Interesting. So you're saying that socialism is becoming kind of more of a view of the young people. So far left socialism used to be frowned upon by the average American. So what's changed and why? Is it just kind of that viewpoint of the younger generation, do you think?
I think it is. The younger generation didn't have the experience that I had growing up. Now, if you go back in American history to the 1920s and 1930s, socialism was very popular. Even far left radical socialism was very popular. Fascism became popular in the United States of America. Adolf Hitler had his admirers here, even people who were working in the presidential administration, because they thought that guy knows how to get things done, right? So what happened after World War II is the rise of international communism. And in China and in the Soviet Union and in other places, there was wholesale slaughter of people to the point where one scholar said possibly up to 360 million people have been killed at the hands of their own government in the 20th century. 360 million people. It's wholesale slaughter in the 20th century. I saw that, right? So I remember being in high school and seeing videos of parades of military equipment and realizing the Soviet Union has enough nuclear weapons to destroy the world 15 times over. None of the young adults I'm working with have ever had that experience. As far as they know, socialism is just what, respectable countries in Scandinavia do. And so it's really no problem at all. We should have more of that here. They don't see the tie-in between the Marxist ideology and the socialist mindset.
Interesting. So is there any way that, do you think that almost the definition of socialism could change just based on the new world viewpoint of it? Is that a possibility?
Well, keep in mind, you've got an entire generation of young people who think that whatever they want to have happen is what is true. So they don't believe that Bernie Sanders is a person who does whatever he does. He's whatever they want him to, based on how they feel about themselves. So they don't. So I think the problem with the socialist worldview is that it's based on Marxism, which is based on materialism. Only the material world exists. There's no heaven, there's no hell, there's no God, no Jesus, no Holy Spirit, nothing outside of the material world. It's the physical world. You have trees, then you have wealth. You have mines, then you have wealth. And if there's only so much to go around and one person has more, that means they stole it. So it's not wrong to take it back from them because they stole it in the first place. What the young adults I'm working with today have completely missed is that wealth grows through good ideas, through innovation, through inspiration. So a lot of what we do at Summit Ministries is not just trying to say, hey, you believe this about socialism, that's bad. We say, here is what a mindset based on scripture could lead us to. Great ideas, innovation, inspiration, opportunities to overcome problems, not just by redistributing wealth, but by changing everything in the way we operate based on a biblical worldview. We try to give them that vision.
Where are today's youth getting these ideas from?
Mostly social media, and I know this because this last summer we did our programs virtually and we did a lot of polls. So I have polls from hundreds and hundreds of students, and I asked them, where do you think most people get their ideas? And about 65 or so percent say people get their ideas from social media. 1% get their ideas from church. 1%. So next to social media, it's friends. Next to friends, it's family or the news, something like that. But the church has almost no influence on these young adults, and these are mostly Christian young adults we're talking about.
And are they not learning the proper history in school?
I don't think I guarantee you they're not getting a proper history in school, because I have reviewed all of the textbooks. And it's tragically, it's woefully inadequate in explaining anything from the standpoint of reality, not necessarily from a biblical view, but just what is real? How do we know? I mean, how could somebody look at a country like the Soviet Union and say, oh, I guess Marxism's really not that bad? But how could they look at China or Venezuela even and say, oh, it's not really that bad? I mean, you have to have decided ahead of time that you're going to be a deceiver when you write that textbook in order to come up with the kinds of things that people have come up with.
Wow. Okay, so you mentioned before that statistics show that 69% of evangelical youth who attend church don't believe in absolute truth, right? And you agree that so these young people are believing now that if their beliefs offend someone, then their beliefs might be wrong, right? So why do you think that absolute truth matters?
I think absolute truth matters in the world of ideas in the same way that gravity matters in the world of physics. You have to take it into account. I just love seeing the picture of that water tower grill. I want to go there and eat sometime. But if I decided I'm going to stand up on that thing and I'm going to jump off, I'm going to just jump off of the edge. The law of gravity says that I will go down, not up. Even if I feel like I want to go up, I'm going to go down, not up. You don't break the law of gravity, you just prove the law of gravity, right? In the same way, the idea of a moral absolute truth is that truth does exist. Justice is a real thing. It's not just something that is a concept that I can have if I can make myself more powerful. That love is a real thing, that the kingdom of God exists, that spiritual realities are just as real as physical realities. That's at the heart of a biblical worldview. It's also at the heart of a generally philosophical worldview. I did a doctorate in philosophy. That was my academic training. And philosophers all get this, but very few other people do. So absolutely recognize that there is truth and you are not it, is at the heart of living a good life.
Okay. And you were saying that apparently only 19% of church-going, born-again Christians have that biblical worldview. So how would you define a biblical worldview?
Well, a biblical worldview is a pattern of ideas that starts with God exists. Because God exists, we can know what is real. Because we can know what is real, we can know what is right and what is wrong. Because we can know what is right and what is wrong, we can know how to form a flourishing society. We can know how to be mentally healthy, so forth. It applies to every area of life. It starts with Jesus Christ. That Jesus is at the center of it all, and everything else, as John Stott said, is circumference. When you start with that Jesus is at the heart of it, Jesus was the creator of the world, you actually, even though you're starting off with things that people say, that's just so crazy, you're talking about miracles and all of that. But if you start off with that, you end up with a view of the world that is more reasonable, rational, intelligent, and true than if you take a worldview based on, say, secular or materialist assumptions.
And then what about unbiblical views? Can those be turned around?
I think unbiblical views can be turned around if we recognize what they are. So, for instance, a worldview that's very influential in my country and in yours is the worldview of secularism. Secularism essentially says, look, there may be a God, probably not. People who believe in him are crazy, but they have the freedom to do it. But even if God does exist, he's not relevant to anything else that is important. It's not relevant to how we live our lives, not relevant to our culture, programs we produce on television, governments that we have at the local, provincial, federal level, or whatever else. God is not relevant. So a lot of believers embrace that worldview implicitly, say, oh, sure, well, yeah, I believe in God, and I have an experience with him every Sunday morning, but that doesn't affect anything else. That mindset has got to shift. We realize that God is not just something that we add on to our lives, that if what he says in the Bible is true, then it becomes the basis for everything else.
Now, you'd mentioned that culture is influencing our youth today. So what advice do you have for parents?
Mm. My main advice for parents is you want to be sure you're helping your children get a training in the world. You should assume that they have questions that they have not found good answers to about their faith. How do we know there really is a God? How do we know that the world is created rather than it just evolved through random chance processes? How do we know that Jesus really did rise from the dead? How could there be a good God if there is evil in the world? Every young adult I know is asking those kinds of questions. And if they aren't getting answers in church, then they're going to assume it's because the church doesn't have the answers. You've got to train them in a biblical worldview. We can help. Summit Ministries, summit.org. There are a lot of other organizations too that will help you. Apologetics and worldview training are a big part of. There's a lot of programming on the internet. There are a lot of ways that you can get that training for your kids. But I believe it's absolutely vital today.
Dr. Jeff Myers, president of Summit Ministries based out of Colorado and author of Unquestioned Answers. You can find that at summit.org along with many other resources, as you were saying, right? Thank you so much for being with us today.
Absolutely happy to do it.
I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Miracle Channel. Thanks for watching.